Hello, I'm Sean Collinson, an English consultant with the Literacy Company and also an advisor to Teach Active. We've worked together to make sure that we've got a really high quality resource for you that relates to various elements of the national curriculum for English. I'm going to talk to you about how you can use it to enhance your English provision, particularly with a focus on reading. First of all, let's just look at some of the key features of Teach Active. So it's organised by year group and objective. So as you can see, it's really simple. On the left-hand side of your computer screen, you can choose the year group that you want to focus on. As I said, we've linked it to key areas of the National Curriculum Programme of Study for both writing and for reading. It's based on key skills and objectives that we know children need to be working on. And they might be some of the more comprehensive style questions that you need to look at, and those skills that maybe you want children to practice in more detail. We have that progression of skills in place. So again, we know what children need to be doing and when they need to be doing it. So we've made sure that that progression is built in. It can be adapted to suit the needs of your learners. So a lot of the lessons have got tips on how you can either extend it or how you can adapt it for children that may need a little bit of support. And in terms of the reading, it might be that they would be reading more or less of the text. And it really builds on your core teaching. So we want it to enhance whatever it is that you are doing naturally to make sure that children have got more opportunities to practice and rehearse those skills. Let's have a look now about how we think you can use it in the classroom to enhance your provision. So you could use it to plug some identified gaps, and I'm going to go into each one of these in a bit more detail. You can use it to support that planning delivery of guided reading groups. It's to make sure you've got that coverage of reading across a range of genres and topics. And we know that it can be really hard to make sure children have got access to high quality poetry or non-fiction. So we've made sure that you've got that range to choose from. It provides additional opportunity for children, as I said, to practice and apply those skills. So you may have taught them in more detail in one lesson, and then you can use some of these activities to make sure they keep practicing and mastering those skills. It's going to give you some assessment opportunities, and it will also support some SATs revision as well. We know the types of questions that come up in SAT, so we've made sure that some of the activities and follow-on tasks lend themselves to that. And we want children to develop a love of reading. Now, they're not going to do that unless they've got those skills in place, but we hope that this will also support that. And you may want to then go on and have a look at books linked to some of the themes that we've got in the Teach Active lessons. So having a look at some of those now in a little bit more detail. So first of all, plugging those identified gaps. So this is what you might be doing really. You may have done some formative or summative assessment that shows that there's a gap in your children's knowledge. We want you then to identify that area of reading that pupils are struggling with. So it might be around sequencing of events, it might be around inference, it might be around predicting or summarising. And then what you would do, you would go and have a look at the games and activities from Teach Active that cover the necessary skills. Now, as you can see here, we've got an example of year 2, we've gone down to reading. What you then can choose is the genre that you want to use in order to practice those skills. So I'm going to use some poetry in this example, and it's the sequencing of events that my children are struggling with. And I've got 3 options there that I can choose from. I may have wanted to use a different genre. So on that drop down where we've got poetry, you can then go and choose maybe some non-fiction. We've got letters in there. We've got we've got fiction as well. So you can go and choose them and use which one you want. And that again can link to maybe something that you're doing in class. Adults then would maybe deliver the sessions to the pupils or need it, or it might be a whole class issue that you want to work on. And as you go along, then you can evaluate and assess their understanding about those skills, and then also how they're going to apply it in other situations in terms of their reading. And then we can start again. Then our next set of assessments might identify another skill that I want to pick up on, and then I'd go back to the web page and I would choose the ones that I want. And this kind of fits in with it really as well. It's about supporting guided groups and making sure that children have got what they need in their groups. Now, in reading, this can be difficult because you need to make sure that if children are still working on decodable text, they're reading decodable text, but you might want to give them something that you've read to them that they can then unpick and focus on the skills. So this is how you might use it with different guided groups. You'd identify those gaps as we've just talked about, and then you'd organise those pupils into groups depending on the skill that you want them to work on. As I've just shown, you can click on the year group, then choose a genre to explore those skills. So if you've got a focus on letter writing in your classroom, then you might want them to write letters to get more experience of that. There are then 20 to 30 activities per skill, and they're split up across the different genres. So it is a bit different to some of the writing plans that are on there, but that's to offer again that choice and flexibility for either a teacher or a TA that might be delivering it. The planning is there for you, it's step by step, everything that you need is explicitly explained there for you, and all the printable resources are provided, and that would include the text as well for the adult to read to the children or sections for them to read themselves. And as I've already said, there'll be then those suggestions for challenge and support within it. And this would be perfect to use in follow-on tasks. So a model of reading that we advocate would maybe be that you do some whole class shared reading, followed up on subsequent days, or some people do it all in one go, of groups, so that you can then really target the skills that those children need and pitch the text for them. But then all pupils can then do a follow-on task. And that's where this could come in. So it might be after you've done the whole class, after you've done the groups, the follow-on task, either all together or maybe groups do it with a different adult, could choose one of these activities. And just to let you know really that this follows on from the best practice advice from the DFE, that curriculum planning should be informed by an assessment of pupils' starting points and addressing the gaps in their knowledge and skills, in particular making effective use of regular formative assessment. So another thing that we said is that we wanted to make sure that children had access to obviously a wide range of genres, and this can really make it link to other areas of the curriculum as well for you. So the texts that we've written and created cover a full range of fiction and non-fiction genres. They do link to wider curriculum topics, and we've really thought about the topics that are frequently taught in both Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. So for instance, you know, if you're doing something in history, or we know what you'd be doing in geography, there'll be a text hopefully that would match up there for you. There's vocabulary in there as well that will support the children's writing as well as their reading. We know that the two go hand in hand, and that's where children are going to get their wide use of vocabulary. It's not in day-to-day life, it's from the text that they read or hear read to them. So we've really thought about that as well. And as you can see, here's one example of one of the texts in there, and another one for a younger child. So they're really engaging. We've thought about the layout of them, we've thought about what you'd want to include, and to really make them accessible to all children. And how you might use it in the class for whole class teaching as well. We've talked a little bit about groups, but just some tips really on whole class teaching. So it could be delivered as part of your whole class lesson. So you know what skills you want to focus on, and everything we do, we talk about a mastery approach. So it's making sure that children really master a skill. So you may have decided that this half term or in these weeks, we're going to really focus on a particular skill linked to inference, and I'm going to choose those activities to deliver whole class. With that flexibility that's in there, it means that you can select those lessons which fit into your wider planning as well. There's that opportunity to revisit previously taught objectives before moving on to develop those skills further. So, as I said, it builds on your class teaching that you may have already done. So it may be, say, in a week, Monday, you've done a whole class shared reading with a physical text. Then maybe you've done some guided groups, some follow-on tasks. Maybe Friday becomes your active reading lesson, where you can recap all those skills and use it to assess how children have got on. I did mention about assessment briefly, and also about SATs revision. So we know that children need some rehearsal really of some SAT skills to be familiar with what the test papers may look like, but also we want to know that they're exploring the types of skills and questions that they will be asked. So our objectives, we made sure we focused on the content domains for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, which we know are used to produce the SATs papers and the SATs questions. Those style of activities that we've created will make a refreshing change to maybe some more formal at-desk activities. So although it will still be pulling from the content domains and making sure that children are rehearsing those skills, for children that maybe need it presented in a different way, this is going to be ideal. And what's really important is that children build that metacognition as well. So some of the activities and that competition make pupils more aware of the skills they're learning and also more reflective on how they can improve. And so it's just, again, maybe children that are struggling to access in a more formal setting with that element of competition. It's going to help them remember that, and it's going to give them just something more to grasp onto. It's that self-awareness. You may want to have the text read under timed conditions. Again, this is probably more for older children to get that supporting of fluency and for reading of a whole SATs paper. Again, that could be built in terms of the competition and the competitive side, and the active side of things are reading it under a timed condition before completing. And I think maybe some of the ones where you go out and about looking for things and treasure hunts would fit in with that. And then just showing you these two. So In Your Shoes is a year 6 activity. It's linked to a story and linked to inference, and in particular characters' thoughts, feelings, and actions and dialogue. So it's an example of a SATs question there about what effect did the knock on the door have on Veronica and her family. So this activity of In Their Shoes is really going to help support children with that type of question. The two can go hand in hand. And finally, we want children, as I said, to develop that love of reading. And when we think back on our journey, I think a lot of us can remember a text that we love has been read to us by an adult, whether it was in school or whether it was at home. And children aren't going to develop that naturally unless they hear adults reading and loving books, and unless they've got those skills to be able to access a book themselves. So we're hoping that this will form part of your development of love of reading because of that variety of topics and genres. So trying to make sure there's something to interest every pupil. You've just seen some examples of those texts. They're eye-catching, they're ebooks, the engaging layouts and illustrations. We've developed them to hold children's attention. It may be that children have got a particular topic that they're interested in, so they could access these texts and you could do activities to help develop that interest. And as I said briefly before, it might be that they want to then go on and read other books. So you might want to add texts into your classroom that complement the ones that you've looked at in your active lessons. We've written them at an instructional level for children to access, and then they're designed to support fluency and also, as I said, develop that vocabulary element for children. And here's just another example of one. Again, you can see it's linked to the Stone Age, so it fits in with topics that you'll be doing, and it's accessible to the children. You may want them to take little bits of it to read, and then you could have books back in the classroom to just enhance that. So thank you very much for listening. Hopefully this has just given you a few more ideas about how you can use the Teach Active lesson plans for reading to help enhance what's in the classroom.